Hi, I'm Ben Green. I'm retired Assistant Chief, Tactical Communications for the Governor's Office of Emergency Services in California. Spent 30 years in California as a COM-C by ICS positions, Communications Coordinator. Before that, I've had various volunteer jobs since the 1970s. So we'll go down a little bit of historical perspectives, and it kind of relates to what we're doing now. You might not think so, but it does. 1928, Detroit PD had one-way AM mode shortwave HF radio to their vehicles. That's how they dispatched in 1928. 1933, Bayonne, New Jersey goes, you know, we can do it better, we can do two-way. So they did two-way AM mode. 1935, we all know about Johnstown flood. Prior to that, amateur radio has always been involved in some kind of disaster communications, usually with radios about as big as this podium, so they weren't very portable. But it really, amateur radio, EMCOMM, emergency communications, began in 1935. It started the processes of ARES. In 1937, FDNY started using two-way radio. 1942, actually December 7th, 1941, shortly thereafter, the FCC shut down amateur radio. 1942 was a challenging time for civil defense. We kind of patterned our civil defense under Britain's civil defense. There was a need, the civil defense authorities figured out, oh, we don't have any radio operators, they're all going to the Signal Corps or the Navy. WERS, War Emergency Radio Service, was born in 1942. Lasted until World War II, shut down in 1946. It was a product of the Office of Civil Defense. The War Emergency Radio Service used 5 meters, 112 to 116 megahertz, megacycles back in that day. FM, which was considered UHF at the time. UHF actually really started playing around with it with the vacuum tubes in the 30s. It was like, it's like Starlink now. 1946, MTS was born. World War II really produced our telecommunications industry, really cranked up. 1946, Mobile Telephone Service, MTS, was born. Trunk mounted, two-way radio, basically you had to go through an operator. 1948, Class A and Class B, CB on UHF was authorized by the FCC. Those of you who don't know what Class A is, I'll get to that, but it becomes GMRS. There was a gap between the shutdown of World War II in 1946 in the 50s, you know, the Cold War started. Truman administration goes, you know, we have a gap in communications again. RACES was born. RACES was supported by ARRL using ARES guidelines learned from the 1930s and through the 40s, based on the WERS, the War Emergency Radio Service. And it's an all-volunteer, as you know, Armageddon program. At least that was the original design. We'll call you if we need you. 1950s through the 1970s. And again, you can see how the rapid escalation of our technology has influenced us in the hobby of amateur radio and in the emergency services. Everybody remembers 2150 to headquarters, Broderick Crawford, Highway Patrol. By the way, sidebar, that's a real call sign from the California Highway Patrol's commissioner in the 1950s, 2150. Really the first memorable use of a radio on a TV program. We really saw him talking on the radio. Rescue 8 used the Motorola pack set. Emergency incorporates the EMS radio to hospital comms. Again, you see a lot more realistic communication. Granted, there was a lot of liberties that Hollywood took that to this day I still want to call up somebody that's now a silent key, but he used to be a producer, and said, why are they using an EMCOMM to portray a public safety radio dispatch consoles, or a Kenwood or a Yaesu, you know, you see it. Adam 12 chips shows using two-way law enforcement. Along the same line, 1950s, 1970s, civil defense evolutions. Of course, we all remember 1958. We lost the 11-meter band to CB Class D. 1962, REACT was established, monitoring Channel 9. 1968, ICS was conceived, developed from the U.S. Navy by Southern California fire chiefs. In 1970, my old agency, California State OES, was created by then Governor Ronald Reagan from several state departments, notably the Civil Defense Office. A lot of retired generals were civil defense directors, his military posture, and so on. 1972, ICS was fully integrated into the California firefighting lexicon, mostly wildland fire, but expanded to urban and structured, and was adopted by the U.S. Forest Service nationally. 1979, FEMA was created by President Jimmy Carter from several, again, kind of patterning what California did 9 years earlier. Maybe it's a coincidence. From several related agencies, primarily, again, the civil defense, broadening the emergency management posture. The word emergency management hadn't really gotten into our lexicon in the 1970s. California had a state senator, Senator Campbell, had hearings on the shortfalls in 1983 on some of our communications. 1983 was also the cellular telephone system was inaugurated. The Senator Campbell hearings produced a COM-C position for the state of California, the state RACs, that also include the EBS. 1987, GMRS was created from the Class A CB done in the 40s. I actually had a Class A. It wasn't grandfathered because the rules changed, so I had to get a new GMRS license. Back in the 70s, I had a, just like CB radio, a 3x4 call sign on Class A, UHF. California had, or 1989, APCO P25 digital standard concept was approved. 91, the Oakland Hills firestorm in California creates the Petrus bill. State Senator Petrus' house burned down in that fire, in large part due to incompatible hose and hydrant couplings between San Francisco and Oakland. Whoa. One was 1.5 inches or 2 inches, I don't remember the specifics, but incompatible. San Francisco shows up, can't hook up to Oakland's fire hydrant. Not good. Again, regulations were created. Here in Florida, 1992, what happened? Homestead, Andrew. Changed communications again, our processes. One of the biggest changes was 1993. Actually, the whole year of 1993 was like, whoa. Bill Clinton gets elected. he appoints James Lee Witt, the FEMA administrator. He was the former OAS director of Arkansas under then Governor Bill Clinton. And he becomes a cabinet secretary in 1996. But FEMA transitioned from a more boots on the ground posture in 1993 under James Lee Witt. Very personable guy. I met him, talked with him. He actually knew his state RACES chief and was very much pro communications. 1993, based on the Petrus bill in 1991, SEMS was created in California. SEMS is the Standardized Emergency Management System. As a result of the Petrus bill, started to standardize all fire equipment in the state of California. That's when the typing came in, type 1, type 2, type 3. Expanded to emergency management, and again, drawing back from way back in 1970, the ICS program. 1993, state of California changed state RACES nomenclature to ACS. RACES is too restricted through the use of the name could continue, although the use of the name could continue. I'll use my example. I was the RACES chief in a county much like Hillsborough, San Diego County. I spent 5 years as the RACES chief there, and I remember some teeth gnashing and t-shirt ripping in conference rooms about names, and they decided that RACES was established. And by established, I don't mean amongst ourselves. I'm talking about the political appointees, the county commissioners, the mayors. They're the ones that don't understand all our nomenclature. But we did a lot of marketing in San Diego County, and so we adopted RACES, much like Hillsborough. Everybody knows Aries, RACES, as far as your political appointees here. Also in 1993, FEMA publishes the Civil Preparedness Guide, CPG 1-15. It's a guidance for state and local governments to supplement emergency communications from a reservoir of skilled and talented volunteers, mostly through utilization of RACES. But again, RACES was so restrictive, which is why we came up with the term ACS. And we expanded that over time to include every communications known to man, including 2 cans and a string. I mean, we expanded everything in the state of California. 1993, again, all these milestones in 1 year. CERT is founded based upon the 1985 LA City Fire Department model. Frank Borden, Assistant Chief, LA City Fire, who I met, I talked with him several times. He went to Japan. We were both members of the California Emergency Service Association, Association of All Emergency Managers in California. There was a group of folks that went over to visit Kobe, Japan after their big earthquake, and learned how Japan incorporates civilian volunteers in neighbor helping neighbor. And because before the first responders can even show up, can you lift that table off that person, and that sort of, that concept. In 93, again, like I said, FEMA adopted the CERT program from LA. I don't know why California, will sneeze and the rest of the country catches a cold. I don't know. Fast forward to 2000s, and NIMS was created by FEMA, again, based on California's SEMS, loosely. They won't admit it. They won't admit anything. Another little thing that happened in the 2000s, 2017, FRS was created out of the Class B CV from the 1940s. They resurrected that frequency. And those of you that know GMRS and FRS, they share the same frequencies in many cases. So as I mentioned, 1993 was a very busy year for emergency communications. We changed the name to ACS. The name better represents all communication volunteers in government service. I want to emphasize in government service. The intent is for a simple, definitive descriptor when addressing volunteer communications to public officials. It's not meant to add another acronym to the Soup Bowl. However, if a jurisdictional organization wishes to adopt that nomenclature, then drop the other ones. You can by the FCC rules and regulations, and RACES, by the way, is a service of the FCC, not a FEMA program. It's not an emergency management program. It's a civil defense program that has transitioned to emergency management, but it's a FCC rules and regulations. So ACS is as generic as possible to describe any and all non-public safety communications. Primarily in the plans, you still write in that you're operating as a RACES unit should that be activated by the FCC. We were very close during the first Gulf War. They said, oh, we're going to declare war. And then somebody in the Fed say, according to Part 90, we're going to shut down amateur radio. Wait a minute, time out. ARRL fortunately stepped in, among other folks, and said, no, we're not going to shut down amateur radio. Anyway, because of these acronyms, and you know how many of them, and on my slide you see them. It's about the only thing on the slide to be good. Over the years, too many acronyms were used to describe what volunteer radio services is and what we do. It's confusing to public safety officers. A simpler term was needed when describing who we are and what we do. Amateur radio is the largest communications pool to offer volunteers, and it is segregated into multiple NGOs and secondarily some government agencies, all using the same amateur radio service bands. Even Civil Air Patrol has a communications wing, and I noticed they are now, as of 2017, a wing of the U.S. Air Force, a reserve component of the U.S. Air Force. The old propeller with civil defense triangle is gone. I kind of preferred that. But that was kind of cool. Public, some definitions here, because I've thrown around public safety and public service. Public service is activity in support of NGOs and the general public. ARAS is a public service agency. Public safety is activity in direct support of emergency management, law enforcement, fire, and EMS government. Hillsborough County is an example where it combines both public safety and public service under one roof, one logo, one mission. And their mission can be multiple things. In San Diego County, when I was running that, we created levels which ARRL has since sort of adopted. A level 1 volunteer in San Diego County was vetted as if he was a reserve police officer, uniformed, the whole 9 yards. They wanted to sign on the dotted line and yes, I'm dedicated to this, uniformed, the whole 9 yards. All the way down to level 4 is you're an ARES person, but you're dedicated to the Red Cross, or you're dedicated to the... We all had communications into the EOC, but there's so many organizations. LDS has a communications component. The Baptists have one. The Methodists have one. Salvation Army, Saturn, has a big operation. Not to mention some of the other services such as SHARES, which counties can now participate in. I'll get to shares in a minute. Let's go to 1985, the evolution of CERT. As I mentioned, Frank Borden, Assistant Chief of LA Fire. CERT is organized under fire department due to the experience in a variety of emergency, and CERT had local government backing from the beginning. Its training material and classes were all uniform nationally. Where CERT may be lacking is in communications. Many are supported by a fire department's trunked 800 megahertz system with their own talk groups. Other teams may use GMRS, FRS, or MURS, mutual use radio system. Amateur radio is also a player in CERT comms, particularly within mutual aid scenarios. As I mentioned, we're all using the same bands. What CERT did is marketing, plus they had the backing government. Because, getting back to the alphabet soup that we have, unless you can market yourself to a county or city, a jurisdiction, and they understand the worth, then you're basically going to be you're going to be an outside also ran. We'll call you once in a while, and that interrupts your training. That's really not the purpose of EMCOMM. A communications emergency is defined as something that can impair or overtax existing day-to-day public, commercial, and or public safety systems. We had the case of the bomb in Nashville at the AT&T central office. Wiped out half of the southern states' communications. A lot of things are on wireline these days or microwave, including public safety radio. This is where emergency communications, EMCOMM, comes in to assist in the response and restoration. In 2005, I was approached by John Peterson, who was working in the federal government and helping ARRL update their ARS Emergency Communications Guide. I have a slide to show you the cover, but I don't have it with me. To offer some of my experiences with the California side of things, the result was the handbook in in 2005. To fill the need of training, the ARRL produced a version of the radio emergency communications focusing on amateur radio. That was the ARECC, the Blue Books. Those are still available. The new revisions, I don't even know what revisions there are now. The 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3 of the courses. Most are self on the internet now, or you have classrooms. These courses give ARS a much needed thorough review of the comprehensive world of EMCOMM. If you haven't taken those courses, I recommend you go to the ARRL website and sign up for those. It's very informative, a lot of good information in there. There's several revisions. Obviously, it evolved into online and local classroom. All EMCOMM training includes and requires basic FEMA independent study courses on ICS now. In fact, you can't even be a public official, elected sheriff, mayor, whatever, without going through a basic ICS course. It's required. Otherwise, no money to that city or county. That's how FEMA kind of holds your feet to the fire. So what's AUXCOM? Well, auxiliary communications. Again, we're the love of an acronym. It's an all-inclusive term used to describe the many organizations that provide various types of communication support to emergency management, public safety, and other government agencies, or describes the services themselves. This includes, but not limited to, amateur radio, military radio, CB radio, etc. FEMA's EMCOMM does have, again, its roots in California with our ACS concept. EMCOMM was developed by DHS after 2001, then with the then Office of Emergency Communications. Now it's administered by CISA. That is the Cyber Infrastructure.
It's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
My slide mentioned that, but I didn't write it down here. Thank you. I just don't have it memorized.
I fight with them weekly.
Yes, they're federal government, so you know. Over the last 25 years, CISA has added training, task books, guides to aid public safety in the management of EMCOMM incidents. The level of training gained in EMCOMM will prepare one for inclusion into the public safety world, including ESF2, Emergency Function 2, which is communications under the ICS program. This leads me to the point of, in government, a communications reserve. A communication reserve is a source of volunteers organized within the government jurisdiction, much like police reserve or volunteer fire. They should be incorporated within the ESF2 Emergency Management Organization. A communication reserve is considered a part of the interoperability public safety posture of any governmental organization. Consequently, a comm reserve complements, not replaces, public safety communications. When I was doing San Diego County and we reorganized to a communications reserve, we didn't call it that, we just functioned as that. We were called RACES, San Diego County RACES. Again, marketing. But the dispatch world, the sheriff's dispatchers were concerned. Their union leader actually went to the board and say, what's this group of guys with radios? So I had to step in and explain to them, again, the concept that, no, we're here to complement you. We don't do dispatch. Actually, what we did caused them to form, again, California, called the Incident Dispatcher Training. It's where you take a dispatcher out of the comfort of their comm center and put them in the field with a mobile command unit or communication unit. Using, again, we introduced the concept in the 1970s as the state began to expand logistical assets to assist local governments. The State Emergency Services Office was small and we employed volunteers, some with no amateur radio experience, but were highly qualified in operating mobile communications. We had AV professionals. We actually had 2 rocket scientists, literally, from Lockheed. And they provided, over the next 50 years, my former state evolved into the Communication Reserve Unit of the Tactical Communications Branch. The greatest compliment you can have as a volunteer, if you're assigned an agency in the government, is working alongside the paid staff, and the paid staff not realizing that you're a volunteer. That's the best compliment you can have. Is, oh, I thought you were employed here. Well, I am, but I just don't get paid. That's happened on numerous occasions. We've been approached, I've been approached over time, obviously since the 90s. We're approaching the 21st century, now we're in it. Why do we need amateur radio? Why do we need EMCOMM? Why do we need any of this ancillary communications? because stuff happens. It's just a fact of life. You cannot rely on your multi-million-dollar trunk system, no matter how robust it is. I escaped California in 2021, retired on full-time RV, chose South Dakota as home of record because of no taxes, no state tax, among other things, remailer. I was raised in Delray Beach, being from Michigan. I was the original snowbird kid. And so my formative years in the 50s and 60s, I was in Delray Beach in the wintertime. So I was familiar with Florida a little bit. I'm now residing in Polk County, still in a travel trailer and still plan on traveling. But I changed my domicile and residence to Polk County. And I help out Polk County areas as best I can. But it's almost like night and day. I want to maybe touch on the difference between Hillsborough and Polk County. Polk County is more ARES oriented, is not really been adopted, fully integrated into the emergency management, even though they are, but they aren't. For instance, they don't have an ID card. You can't get in this building without an ID card and an access code. So Hillsborough County is obviously a true communication reserve unit. You could probably walk in to anywhere in the county and they think that you're an employee because of the marketing that's been done here. A lot of that really comes down to money. You heard Bill talk about it today, about the tower, the money and all that. That's all done through FEMA grants and other grants and support by the county on the efforts of building how important they think it is. Because when it comes to the Department of Finance, a radio's a radio. They don't care if it's on an amateur band or on public safety band. Doesn't matter. A lot of the communication reserves that we worked with never even messed with amateur radio except at the EOC radio, because all the assets we had were public safety. But because of we have the talent, we have the history of the hobby, we know the electronics, we work side by side with the paid radio technicians that maintain your equipment. So I will say this, Polk County, much like Hillsborough, got grants because Paul Wamba is a licensed amateur, recognizes the need. So all the repeaters, the 4 repeaters in Polk County ARS are all paid for and maintained by Polk County Communications. The GMRS radio in Bartow is maintained and paid for by Polk County Communications. So there is a lot of support, and if you don't have that support, then you're just kind of like an outside looking in through the window. Anyway, we've got about 15 minutes or so. I'll open it up for questions. Anybody have notes? Or... Yes, sir.
So I took the latest ARRL courses. Took the basic, some of it was out of date, but useful stuff. Took the intermediate, some of it was out of date, but useful stuff. They don't have the advanced. It's not out.
I saw that.
The target is this summer.
Why did that not happen a year ago?
Because they're trying to bring that more up to date with what FEMA and the emergency management community is doing. By the way, everybody, I'm Dave Rockwell. I'm the section emergency coordinator. I also live in the emergency management world. So
I write textbooks. It doesn't take me a year to write that.
but it takes a year to get the committee to all agree to the same content.
Well-
Forgot about the politics part.
Now we understand the problem.
Yeah, yeah,
Anytime you get a group of amateur radio experts together, you have as many different opinions as you have people in the room.
Josh is trying though.
Yeah, and the other problem that Josh has is Josh is overloaded.
Yeah, he's now
taken
field
over
services.
all of field services.
Crazy.
So he's doing the National Traffic System.
I think he's doing the work of 4 people,
Right.
something like
And
that.
what has happened is, as people have retired at Newington, those positions are not being filled
Yeah,
because ARRL is in a belt tightening mode right now. Sorry, I didn't make it to Hamcation. I usually get to talk to the leadership at Hamcation.
yeah, it was good. I did.
But I was, I normally man the booth there. Unfortunately, I came down with a bronchitis that week, and I decided I didn't need to share that with everyone.
I had a good one-on-one with Rick and with Mickey at Amcation after their talk, and it was good.
Josh has just spread
Yeah, and Josh.
phenomenally thin. And we have tended to be a little stovepipe in Florida. The 3 sections kind of run their own thing.
I noticed.
Looks like we're going to probably start doing some interop with South Florida. But of course, our Thames is kind of aimed towards North Florida and keeping the EOC happy. But of course, he's an emergency management professional as well. We do have some good programs going on, and I encourage everybody. EMCOMM's a good program. Shares is a good program if your county's involved in it. I happen to be the shares coordinator for the Coast Guard Auxiliary. That's why I say I'm fighting with CISA all the time.
I can imagine.
Right now, they are not approving any new share stations because the new shares form is stuck on the DHS General Counsel's desk and is a very low priority. And right now, that office has no one in it.
Yeah. And they're in government shutdown.
Well, that's why there's no one in the office.
Yeah, exactly.
The contractors are working at the sheriff's office. The two civilians are on furlough.
And they changed contractors a couple of years ago, right? It used to be.
Yeah, they changed contractors. They kept the same people. I
Yes,
mean,
sir.
Dan North is still there.
Yeah, Dan, well, he's like furniture.
Yeah, but his partner in crime, she retired.
Yeah, that was Amanda, I think.
Huh?
Amanda?
Amanda.
Yeah.
So what is the current usefulness of NTS?
National Traffic Safety? You want to handle
I also
that?
happen to be the second traffic manager.
In my county, we've never, ever had a single message moved in any disaster by the NTS in the 10 years that I've been working with Aries.
And that's a good thing, because that means your contingency systems are working. That the route capability of moving traffic is voice or CW, moving traffic. In today's resilient communications world, the chance of doing that is probably less than 1%. However, it is still an important skill. And if you're going to use the digital traffic system, you need to know the formatting and the structure and how you route radiograms. Do people use radiograms? No, they all got text on their phone until they don't.
Ideally, they should use the ICS forms.
Well, and the there is mapping of the ICS 213 into the radiogram format. Okay.
I can't think of the SEC that created the, he's out of California, of course. His name escapes me totally, but he worked with Steve Waterman on the WinLink to make all the ICS forms.
Oh yeah, they're completely in there with
Yeah,
Steve.
that was done by an SEC in California.
Yeah, I mean, they released that. Also, RRI, Radio Relay International, has a ICS 213 radiogram form that you can use. Okay. Would I send an ICS 213 by voice over analog FM?
Yeah.
Not if I had anything else.
Yeah.
Okay. It's hard enough passing those things around. I see a lot of 213s because I teach ICS 400. And I'm the mail truck.
You got a lot of fingers in the pie there.
Well, I do emergency management and emergency communications. I've done it since about 1976. So.
But the methodology, getting back to NTS, the methodology of NTS is still viable. It's the message may have changed. No longer are we passing a lot of health and welfare stuff because, like Dave said, everybody's got a phone. Hell, I mean, look at what Navy Marine Corps Mars did. They shut down. In my opinion, they shouldn't have. But as far as the afloat services goes, I understand. There's no need to send, "Hi Mom, I'm okay," when you got a satellite that you can get on your iPhone on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and talk to them.
Stay tuned.
However, I was the ECOMM coordinator in Southern California for Navy Marine Corps Mars, and we had two functions that the Navy Department didn't quite grasp. And that was the station augmentation teams, SAT teams, which would come into a Navy base and assist the Navy communications there, and the mobile relay teams, the mobile teams. Very well. Again, that's in a shore. The Navy was very complicated when it came to Mars because they had an afloat system. The ships would send messages to volunteers, and they had a shore system. The shore base, the shore calls could not talk to the afloat. I mean, if like you're on the repeater, for instance, I was on a ship off of Oceanside. Wanted to talk to, and I've used my call sign, NN0 Juliet Sierra India. I got on the repeater using the ship's call sign, I don't remember what that was. On the repeater, and one of the Mars guys came on and said, "Who is this?" And I said, "Well, I'm on USS Umpty Scrunch." And he said, "You can't be talking on this repeater, this is a shore base." I was like, wait a minute, this is before I got involved in EMCOMM, one of the reasons why I did. And it's like, wait a minute, this is communications. If I'm not going to send an HF radio message when I can see the repeater from where I'm at offshore. So the Navy was very complicated. I've been to Fort Huachuca, the Army Mars, very good, robust. There was a presentation on shares a while back on what the Air Force has done. Like I mentioned earlier, they're a wing of the Air Force Mars, and they have the global, their other usefulness is they are global tactical communication auxiliary to their regular ones. And I can imagine they're probably very busy today, seeing that we're now bombing Iran.
I think we're at 10 o'clock.
So, I think we ended right on time, hopefully. Thank you all.